Okay, well, let's go ahead and kick this off. I know we have a few attendees, but we'll also have a recording available, and we can have that in the applications themselves for folks to refer to. So I'm Paige Sharp. I'm Deputy Director of Programs with the Indiana Arts Commission, and I'm here to welcome you all today and also share that this webinar is actually presented by the Regional Arts Partner who oversee the Arts Organization Support Program. We could not do the amazing work that we do without the Regional Arts Partners being in the communities, directly serving folks. It's their commitment, dedication, experience that is so highly important to this program success. Oh, you're in great hands today. And with that, I invite Kayla Myers, our partner from Region 2, to kick this off. Thank you.
Thanks, Paige. So for some general housekeeping announcements, we are recording today's webinar, which will be emailed to you later this week. We ask that all participants please mute themselves throughout the presentation, and questions can be typed into the chat box. We will also allow a few minutes for questions at the end of the presentation. And if you need accommodations for the grant guidelines or online application, please contact the IAC's Accessibility Coordinator, Stephanie Haynes, as shown on the screen. Live captioning is being offered during this webinar. You can turn on your captions in the toolbar at the bottom of the screen. If you need help with captions or any accessibility during this webinar, please send a private chat to Chapin Snick. So based on population, the IAC has divided our state into 11 different regions. Typically, these workshops are done at the regional level, but the pandemic has provided an opportunity to work together more in recent years. At the end of the presentation, we'll provide contact information for all of the regional arts partners so you can identify yours if you're not familiar. As Paige noted, I'm the partner for Region 2, and additional regional arts partners will be joining me. Ann Fields Monaco from Region 4, Philip Slane from Region 3, Ailey McGill from Region 7, and Ann McKim from Region 10. The IAC's Grants Research and Technology Manager, Chapin Snick, will also be presenting the IAC's online grant system. So today we will be covering information about the FY23 Arts Organization Support Level 1 grant program. Specifically, we will cover the program timeline, what's new this year, application information, evaluation criteria. We'll also view the online grant application and system. Then we'll go through some grant writing tips and finish up with grant recognition and advocacy information. So Arts Organization Support Grants, or AOS grants, provide annual operating support for the ongoing artistic and administrative functions of eligible arts organizations in alignment with the IAC's public funding imperatives, which include excellence, authenticity, inclusion, and education. So please note that current AOS grantees are on a 2-year cycle and are not required to submit an application for FY23. New AOS applicants were required to complete an eligibility questionnaire by January 18th of 22. So therefore, this webinar is intended for new AOS applicants and organizations returning to the program that are not currently receiving IAC funding. So for the FY23 program timeline, the funding period is from July 1st, 22 through June 30th of 23. The eligibility questionnaire, again, was due for first-time applicants on January 18th, and eligibility notifications were sent by the IAC the week of January 31st. The deadline to request a draft application review from your regional arts partner is February 23rd. And then the application itself is due March 9th, 22 at 4:30 p.m. Eastern. We, of course, suggest, if at all possible, that you submit a few days early. The grant evaluation panel for the applications to be reviewed will be late April 22. These panels do vary by region, and your regional arts partner will provide you with the panel information for your region closer to April. And then the grant award notifications are sent out by early July 22 through email. Your first payment, if approved, which is 75% of the award, is typically deposited between late September to early October. And then the final grant report for these funds will be due July 13th of 23. And then lastly, the final payment, which is 25% of the award, comes July or August of 23 after your grant report is submitted and reviewed. So what's new for fiscal year 23? There is an eligibility change. So organizations whose primary purpose is educational or instructional, such as schools, universities, or colleges, are ineligible for AOS. This includes entities or branches operating under the same 501c3, but these entities are eligible to apply to the Arts Project Support Program. If awarded funding, organizations will be required to obtain a unique entity identifier or UEI prior to payment. Since 2010, this has been a Dun and Bradstreet number or DUNS. In April 22, the federal government will switch to use of UEI created in SAM.gov to be the official UEI. And the IAC will provide easy to follow guidance on this in the coming months. We just wanted to make you aware. Award recommendations will be based on the organization's most recently completed fiscal year board approved profit and loss statement total cash income figure. This figure, however, should exclude capital expenditures. And also new this year, there is an updated or clarified expense eligibility that loosens restrictions on capital expenditures to encourage use of funds for accessibility enhancement. And then before we take a look at the application itself, Phil and Ann will review the evaluation criteria that will be used to score your application. So I'll turn it over to Ann.
Thanks, Kayla. Panelists will recommend applications for funding based on a yes with modifications, and no evaluation process. So this is similar, or I mean different really from previous grants in that you won't be necessarily seeing scores for sections of your application. So they'll be looking at it kind of overall. Panelists will be using evaluation criteria to determine funding recommendations though, so we're going to go through those here shortly. But essentially, panelists will have the official panel meeting, which you will be invited to attend via Zoom, and they will discuss your application, whether maybe it was unanimously recommended for funding, yes, they recommend it. Yes, with modifications, they may then discuss, perhaps you forgot to upload a current balance sheet, or they had some concerns about your organization's plan for sustainability over the next year, things of that nature. They will officially come up with what they're going to request that modification to your application to be in order for you to get funding. And then hopefully this doesn't happen, but there may be applications that the panelists agree that they cannot recommend for funding. So like I mentioned, the panelists will be using evaluation criteria. A written list of these criteria can be found in the evaluation criteria PDF, which is on the IAC's website. It is likely also on your Regional Arts Partners web page about the grants. And then you can also find evaluation criteria within the application itself in the online system. Generally, there are links to things as well. This criteria sheet that you are provided with directly aligns with the questions on the application. So this should make reviewing your own application pretty simple. So I'll be talking about the first criteria, which is organizational excellence. So this is kind of the first section of your application that you'll be working on. Panelists will be deciding basically relative to the budget size of your organization, the extent to which you are able to demonstrate sound fiscal management and administrative policies, as well as a demonstrable commitment to continuous improvement, preservation or development of an art form. So again, they'll be kind of looking at your mission and making sure, the operations you describe in your application are kind of aligning with that mission. And so you can see here, panelists really specifically are going to make sure your mission reflects the purpose of your organization that you will be describing in this section. So that means you want to make sure you are describing operations that align with your mission. Remember that panelists are only going to know and score what is written in your application. So it's really important that the information you're providing in this section does align with your mission. Another important thing panelists consider with is the regularity with which your board meets, because you're asked to report on that. So it's important to show you have an engaged board that is helping guide your organization, and that the decision-making process, people are all involved. Lastly, with regard to your organization's level of excellence, they'll be looking at the financial health and stability of your organization. So you will be required to upload a PDF of a profit and loss statement from your organization's most recently completed fiscal year. This is also called an income statement. So one of the things I always recommend to grantees is, when you're starting the application, make sure if you don't have a copy of your financials that you let your accountant or whoever your bookkeeper is know that you will need these reports to submit your application. You will also need to upload a PDF of your organization's most recent balance sheet. For this year, it should be no older than the close of the calendar year, December 31st, 2021. There are some smaller organizations that perhaps do not use balance sheets. So if you happen to be that type of organization, you need to upload just a quick PDF of a written explanation as to why your organization does not have one to share. So just be sure, again, if you don't have a balance sheet, that you upload an explanation as to why. So maybe that's you don't track fixed assets and the only assets you have are a bank account of cash. Things like that are common explanations we receive. You also need to answer questions pertaining to your projected income for the current fiscal year and kind of the general organization's financial situation. But don't fear, if your organization ran a deficit last fiscal year or is facing challenges, be sure to include what your plan is, moving forward so you can achieve financial stability, or maybe an explanation about how last year was an anomaly. So for instance, we had, groups where they normally get funding from the city and, it was included in their original budget, but then they learned the city no longer is funding, their operations. So it looked like they had a budgeted shortfall, but really, it was just because the city had stopped a grant program. So make sure you explain things like that, because again, the panelists are outsiders. They may not even live in your, county. They don't know necessarily what's going on with your organization. So it's important to have that kind of outside lens, especially when you're analyzing financials, because things can look weird, but they're actually not in reality if you write a 2-sentence explanation. But really, again, if you have any questions or concerns about this, your regional partners are happy to help. So I'll stop talking about that, and Philip from Region 3 will tell you about the community engagement criteria that panelists are going to be looking at.
Thank you, Anne. Yeah, so we're going to be looking now at, like she said, community engagement and I.D.E.A. This is a particularly important evaluation criteria just for me personally, but it's also one of those areas where I think we tend to get a lot of questions about what exactly it means and how to go about instituting policies and projects that connect with this particular area of criteria. And so what we're looking for here is essentially the extent to which there is an active, two-way, ongoing relationship between the applicant and the community as it relates to planning, participation, and evaluation of the proposed activities, which includes intentional strategies for inclusion, diversity, equity, and access, which is what I.D.E.A stands for. One of the things that I like to keep in mind as it relates to this section is the African proverb, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that is wholeheartedly what this particular aspect of the application is really looking for, how exactly you're planning to partner with the community and how that will increase your level of impact over the course of the year. Specifically, as it relates to community engagement and I.D.E.A, you're evaluated specifically by the extent to which your organization understands those that it serves, including underserved communities, as well as making sure that there's a two-way ongoing relationship and conversation between the applicant and the community in planning, participation, and evaluation. We're also looking for intentional I.D.E.A strategies that are utilized to increase access to your respective art form, address barriers, and diversify your participants, and that you're addressing physical accessibility, accurately certifying all public activities are ADA compliant, and that you can make reasonable accommodations for anybody who wants to participate. A couple of examples from Region 3 that I thought were good examples of organizations that have kind of gone above and beyond as it relates to this particular area. One is Audiences Unlimited, which is a nonprofit arts organization here in Fort Wayne that coordinates performances for underserved communities and individuals of diverse abilities. So they're connecting with retirement communities, nursing homes, as well as schools to bring in performers of varied abilities to really expose individuals to the arts, but also provide performance opportunities for individuals and artists throughout the region. Another great one is the Fort Wayne Dance Collective, which offers classes in partnership with senior communities and organizations and provides services to individuals with disabilities to create opportunities for participation in movement-based activities that would otherwise really be inaccessible to these groups. These are just two examples of organizations that are really reaching beyond their doors to build relationships and connections with other organizations and communities within the region that can help them to increase their impact and go above and beyond what they can really do just on their own. One of the biggest things that I think is important to remember here is to start having these conversations and building these relationships prior to submitting your application. Not only is that just going to be a great activity for you as an organization to start to go ahead and build some of those relationships outside of this particular application process, but the more that you can show us that that conversation has already started and is ongoing and that there's participation from a lot of different groups and communities within your particular region, the more strength that's going to lend to your particular application. And so with that, I'm going to pass it off to my colleague from Region 10, Ann McKim.
Thanks, Philip. And those were great examples. I always love hearing about what's going on in other regions. So I'm addressing artistic quality, which is evaluated relative to the size of the organization, the extent to which the applicant demonstrates a committed effort to providing quality and/or authentic artistic experiences overall. This includes marketing. The marketing includes up-to-date tools, and that the activities are of artistic, educational, and cultural value. I've chosen a smaller organization from Region 10 to highlight as an example of well-demonstrated artistic quality within their grant application. Strings Inc. operates in Du Bois County and provides violin lessons to local youth with a focus on recruiting participants who might not otherwise have the opportunity for such a program. First, the quality of instruction is explained in the application by sharing information about the teaching philosophy and the credentials of the instructors. Students are taught via Suzuki with 2 17-week sessions and a summer session, and the director has college and master's degrees in music theory and music performance. In addition, the board leadership, as described in the application, includes individuals with music backgrounds. The organization's marketing plan includes traditional and social media, in addition to signage and branding at outreach events and performances. And young people are recruited into the program via demonstrations with instrument petting zoos at public events and schools. Frequent performances are in diverse and accessible locations and are in addition to student recitals. So all of this, I know it sounds like I'm just reading a grant application to you, but really that is picking and choosing. But these are the things that panelists will look for, these types of details to evaluate artistic quality. Another example from Region 10 is the Evansville Philharmonic, which is on the other side of the spectrum in terms of size. So in addition to information similar to that shared by Strings Inc., the Philharmonic highlighted in their application various new initiatives focused on performance of underrepresented or BIPOC composers in traditional and non-traditional concert settings. This, again, is relevant to panelists as they consider the question of cultural value, which you remember is one of those bullet points up there in the evaluation criteria, how shared cultural experiences can strengthen the culture of a community. This is absolutely something that if you're in this place where you're ready to apply for an AOS application, certainly we assume that the quality of the artistic experiences that you're offering is of a level that's meritorious. So it's really just a question of making sure that you're pulling out the information that's relevant to panelists as they evaluate. I could say in my gallery that I have 10 exhibits a year. That's great, but what really helps me explain the artistic quality is saying the 10 exhibits cover this breadth of subject matter. They are produced by X number of artists that we're working with. This is how we select pieces that go into the gallery. Again, your regional arts partners are always available for questions on artistic quality and information that might be helpful or strengthen your application. Now I get to introduce the IAC's Grants, Research, and Information Technology Manager and knower of all things related to the online grant system, Chapin, to take a look at the actual application.
Thank you. So when you visit the application page, so you can get to it even just with in.gov/arts/apply, but our long link I'm going to drop in the chat, and you probably have access to it too already as well. For those of you that are new to the system, or even if you're not, I just want to call attention to the little box of information on the side. You're always welcome to create a new account, but if you think that your organization has applied before, it's a lot easier if you reach out to me and I can make sure to get you linked directly to your organization. Sometimes when it's a situation that you're actually replacing another colleague, I can even just update that information to yours, and you can change the password and you're ready to run with all of the existing information that links back all to the former requests. So I do encourage you, again, if you're never not sure if you should create one or not, just reach out. If you do need to create one, you can see the little create new account button. And even when you're not ready to start that process, you can at least see what things you're going to need to gather. For example, your EIN, your DUNS number for your organization. And as Kayla mentioned earlier, ultimately, we will have to do what's called the UEI by April is when the switch is happening, but we won't actually require it from you until you submit your next steps form, because that'll be what prompts your payment. And so I'll go back. And if you had an account, you can prompt the forget your password on your own. You don't necessarily have to reach out to me for that, but I'm here if you need me. So I'm going to log in with my personal account so we can see it as an applicant. And you'll notice it looks a little strange from the get-go. I don't even have an apply button. And that's because I've also served as a panelist. So if you're someone that might have done that in the past, I just want to make sure you're aware that up at the top right, there is a little drop down and you can select how you are using the system. So in this case, I'm applying, so I change it to applicant. And on this home kind of dashboard, homepage, apply page, whatever you want to call it, I have a few different things that I can view. You'll notice that I have my applicant profile information because you have your login. So the thing that's associated with your email that gets you into the system, but then separate from that is the organization that you're linked to. So it's kind of strange, but the reason for that is there isn't really an organization login. You can't be an organization. You have contacts that are a part of it. So that's why I see both. And in this case, since I've applied as an individual for things like our on-ramp creative accelerator before I was a staff member, that's why my organization is also my name. When you're here, you can click the little pencil icon and make changes if you need to. If there's anything that you see that you can't edit, like for example, my address wasn't an option there, just reach out to me. There's some funny little quirks in the system and I'll get you set up. And by the way, the same is true of your regional art partners. They're happy to help, and they can always forward it on to me if it's something that they realize, I don't know, and I can maybe find out. Also on the same initial page are the requests. So meaning, if you've already started an application, it'll show up in your active requests. Historical, for those of us that have applied for something in the past. And so, maybe for example, you didn't apply in 22 because you had an extension. And so you want to check out your application from FY21. You'll be able to see that. You'll notice a little view application button. You can click into there. If you go into details, you'd be able to see attachments like panel comments, your award letter, almost said acceptance letter, kind of the same thing, I guess. And so that's all available there. But then where you're all here for, actual apply page, accessible at the top. And right away, you'll notice there's this strange inner access code bar at the top. And that only gets used for very occasional programs that have like a small amount of applicants. So you don't have to worry about that for our AOS program. And you could, we don't have a lot of open programs right now, so you probably would never use the search. But when we do, that's an option. Each of the open programs, the ones that are eligible to apply for at this time, are listed, and you'll notice it talks about at what time frame you can apply. And there's 2 buttons that are accessible from this page. You've got an apply, a little blue that's in line with the actual name of the program. And then at the bottom of the bar, we have a preview. So I'm going to scroll to the AOS one, since that's what you guys are here for. And you'll notice, again, there is relevant information before you even enter. But let's say I just want to get a feel for the application before I begin. You can click that preview button. You can expand the drop downs and see what to expect. You can even click up on the little question list PDF at the top right, and it will download PDF for you if you want to, or you could even download it and save it as a Word doc and start typing in your responses to get yourself situated. I will note though that it is a little misleading, because on this preview page, I can actually click into the active bars and start typing, and that actually will not save into the application. You'll notice it's even reminding me here, but I just don't want you to get in a situation where you've entered a lot of pertinent information and then realize down at the bottom, oh, I don't have a save application option. So if you ever get into that situation, just pull up a Word doc, copy and paste it over so you can make sure it gets into the actual application. And let's scroll back up. I'll go back to the apply page and dive into the actual application. And I'll try to make it brief, I promise. So when you're in the application itself, you'll notice that we try to do some color coding to draw attention to important things. So you'll notice red, tends to be like deadlines and, oh my gosh, you have to look at this kinds of things. Anytime it's blue, it's typically going to be a live link, since sometimes it doesn't get underlined. So just want to make sure that it's clear that it's a link. And this whole before you begin section, please make sure you review it, because it'll give you anything that's relevant to the application itself. And then you can always look further with guidelines and even like click here if you're not sure what region you're in. So you can talk to your regional art partner. And if I keep scrolling, you'll notice that there's sometimes even green. And so those are typically whether it's additional notes or examples of things, as you can note here. And there are things that are called question branching sometimes, just want to make you aware of. Say you know another organization that's applying and they shared a question list with you or something, and you see that they have some different questions than you. That's because depending on your responses, you might get a different selection of questions. So for example, let's see, this particular one is, have you received Arts Organization Support funding before? Depending on what you say here, will open additional questions later. So just want to, call your attention to that you want to make sure that each of the questions that you're responding to are in fact relevant to your organization so that you're getting to access the information that is important for your application. See if there's anything else particular about the application I want to note. When it comes to uploads, so times that you need to add an attachment, you'll notice that there is only an opportunity to add one. So if you have more than one document that you wish to include, you'll want to use like a PDF merge. And if you have a Word document or an Excel, you can save that as PDF in order to upload it. Because again, that's what we encourage. And it's kind of a strange request, but it's because of the view for the panelists when they're going to review it, and for the partners. It's a lot more helpful to be able to see it as a PDF. If you have any issues with that, again, feel free to reach out to me or your rep. And the boxes, you'll notice that in this case, we have separate boxes for links, web links. Sometimes if there's an upload that you don't necessarily have, like what in the instance that Anne Fields Monaco was talking about, where you'd actually upload an explanation. Sometimes maybe that isn't mentioned, and it may be that you need to make an explanation in a box. There's always going to be an opportunity for you to add more clarity. And if there's characters for it, you might as well add more so we know as much as possible. So that's kind of the gist. I do want to call out, in addition to the fact that you've got your character count in each box as you're going, that when you, let's say I'm typing when I click out of it, it is going to save that particular box. But if you're like me and you want to double check, you can always scroll as you're working down to the bottom and you have a save application option. See anything else? Oh, and I didn't mention at the top, I'm going to scroll back up. Hopefully it doesn't make you dizzy. You can copy previous answers. So if you're somebody that was AOS a couple years ago and you're coming back, it's possible that many of the questions that we're using are reused from a former application. So if you tell it to copy, you can select a particular application that you've submitted in the past, and any relevant responses it will copy forward. And then that way you've kind of got a starting point. Not necessary. It does take a little bit. The system slows down, but that's an option. And finally, there is a little collaborate button. It's intended to work kind of like when you're in Google Drive, but it's not as user-friendly. So I would encourage you to just, if you need somebody to work on it, we can make sure that they have a contact, a user account in the system. Okay, and finally, when you're ready to submit, I'll click on that. And you'll notice, since I didn't actually fill anything in, it's really mad at me. Everything that I didn't fill out is now listed. And as I scroll back up to the application, it's blocked in red. So that can help. If you only have one item and you can't find it, you can always scroll back and find that. I think that kind of covers it. Again, if I forgot something, give me a holler and we'll make sure to get you situated. Thanks for being here.
Awesome. Thank you, Chapin, for that. And I'm Ailey McGill. I'm the Regional Arts Partner for Region 7. Brand new. We just started last month as the Arts Partner for the central part of the state. And so we're excited. I'm really excited to have our organization be in a place where we can provide that support and get to know lots of other arts providers from around the state. But it also means that I'm still a little new to the grant review process. So I appreciate my other arts partners on this call supporting me through this. And what's great is we have this wonderful network to rely on. So even if I'm too new to answer a question, I have great resources here to get you the information quickly. And so we do want to remind you that there are lots of ways that you can get help with your grant application process. We can review your applications for you. For one thing, if you're a returning applicant, which this year we shouldn't really necessarily have anybody filling out the form I think all of you are new, but when you're a returning applicant, you can always go back and look at the panelist comments that you've gotten in the past to address just address those reactions from your peers in the field who looked at the application previously. That's a great way. Sometimes it should be really obvious if there are issues that would potentially jeopardize your funding in the future, or if they're just sort of suggestions that might strengthen your application and give your board something else to work on to really, just strengthen what you do. But we can also review your new applications. As we mentioned earlier, you need to put in that request by the 23rd of this month in order to give us enough time to look at the application and give you feedback in time to get the application into the system. But that can be anything from, can you look at this one section, to could you read our whole application, or I don't know if this was the right thing I was supposed to upload. That's what we're here for. That's what this Regional Arts Partner Program is all about. So please take advantage of that if you need to. I will also say that there is a list of other applicants or previously approved applicants on the Indiana Arts Commission's website. I'll put the link to that here just momentarily. And sometimes it's nice to take a look at that list. You can look at those organizations, you can track down their websites and just kind of see the sorts of things they're presenting to help position yourself and maybe help you answer and flesh out some of the questions for your own organization. It's sometimes really great to see good examples. So here's the link to that. That's on the Arts Organization Support page of the Arts Commission's website. There are also, as this says here, a collection of webinars and recordings on the Arts Commission's website as well. So again, if you're the sort of person who really likes seeing lots of examples, who likes hearing what other folks have experienced through this program, we have lots of things available for you. And again, on the Arts Organization Support section of the website, there are tips and tricks as well, just for grant writing in general and specifically for this program. So definitely check those out, especially if you've never been through this process before. They really are a helpful way to address your concerns and get you oriented for this process. Then in addition to that, we also want to make sure that you are aware of resources for community engagement and I.D.E.A. as well. Again, the Arts Commission has some great research on their website. There's a tab, which again, I will post the link to, on both of those topics. For one thing, community partnership is such an important component of getting our work done, that you can and should be reaching out to your local community partners, which may be outside the arts, it may be inside the arts, and telling that story of how you're working with other groups in your community can really help with that community engagement section. But then also we want to remind you guys that I.D.E.A. is about inclusion and diversity of all different kinds. How, as Phil mentioned earlier, how are you getting people with different abilities involved? How are you getting people from very different backgrounds, maybe people who haven't had access to the arts before, as well as some of that ethnic and cultural diversity. So the Arts Commission has been collecting great resources on I.D.E.A. topics, and they are at that link, that research link that I provided there. And we really want to encourage you to reach out to us if you are struggling with any of those topics, either community engagement. As we've said before, we're really looking for that back and forth where it's not just that your organization thinks you've come up with a great idea that you just want to see happen, but that there's real communication with your community to verify the needs of the community, to make sure that you're serving the folks who are closest to you. Let's see, what's on the next slide, Chapin? I'm switching back and forth between screens. Another important aspect of this grant process is you will have a report at the end of the fiscal year that you have to turn in, and that will require you to provide an example of how you provided recognition for the grant, a print material. And so make sure that you are planning now to acknowledge the NEA, the Indiana Arts Commission, and your regional arts partner somewhere for this arts organization support once you're funded. Your regional arts partner should have those on their website available. If you're in Region 7, I admit I'm behind, but I can get them to you quickly. And those are all really important because this funding does ultimately come from the National Endowment for the Arts, and we want to make sure that that connection is not just highlighted, but really recognized throughout our state. It's also really important that your audiences know that this funding has lots of parts connected to it and where this funding is coming from. So that's why we really ask for that acknowledgement. But then also we want to make sure that your legislators, who are the ones who help determine the funding that we get and can pass along to you, we want to make sure they know how valuable it is and how important it is. So you will be asked to write thank you letters to your legislators, and we want to make sure that the letters that you send at the beginning, once your grant is approved, and at the end, once you send your report in, that those are different, that they're varied. We highly recommend that at least one of them is handwritten so that you can, because those really stand out when they get to your legislators' offices. We encourage you to use those as an opportunity to invite your legislators in to see what you do and to share with them the impact that you're having in your community. It is really hard for them to vote against you if they know you and love you. So this is an opportunity not only for us to help ensure the future of this funding, but also for you to be really recognized as a beloved asset in your community. Another thing we want to draw your attention to is the Indiana Arts Advocates. If you go to indianaartsadvocates.org, this is a group of people in the state who are working to connect citizens and legislators to emphasize how important the arts are and how important working the arts into legislation is in our state, in our region, and nationally as well. They're working on all of those levels. So we'd highly recommend that you go to Indiana Arts Advocates, or inartsadvocates.org, as it says on the screen, and sign up for their mailing list, pay attention to what they're doing, and get involved when you can, because again, that's another aspect of ensuring this funding and helping to grow this organizational support funding for the future, which we know is so important for all of you and all of us. Let's see, is there anything else on my notes list here? I think that covers my section. So I think I'm going to turn it back to Paige unless anybody has questions for me. Paige, I think you can take it away. Yeah, go ahead.
Just have a few things to add as we wind the bend on this webinar today, and just want to make sure if you haven't subscribed to our newsletters, please do. It's at in.gov/arts/about/news, and that way you can get information about grant opportunities like the Grow, Invest, Gather grant opportunity that's offered right now through Arts Midwest. And the deadline for that application is April 12th for an arts-based project. Hallmark of Arts Midwest applications, they're super easy to fill out, which is always a value add. Not a lot of money, $2,500 bucks, but hey, it's worth a shot. And I also want to let you know about the National Endowment for the Arts Challenge America grant, which is due April 21st. I can throw the links in the chat, but I just want to let you know about these opportunities so that you can also look them up online and subscribe to those good folks as well. So you have multiple opportunities for funding available to you. So thanks for being here today, and I give it back to whomever is going to bring us home.
Yeah, thanks so much, Paige. Appreciate you sharing those additional opportunities as well. Just something to be on the lookout for. I think that concludes the presentation section. We'll open it up if there are any questions. Please feel free to ask us. Now, there was one question in the chat before about getting a PDF of the presentation. So a link to the recording will be sent out in the next week, and that'll include the slides here today. So it looks like there's a couple additional questions. So Amy asked,
On the accessibility components allowed, the only capital expenditure permitted, is that okay for new construction?
Yep, that would be okay as long as it is, I think, as long as it's in concert, whatever it states in the guidelines, you are fine. And it occurs, of course, during the grant cycle.
And then Bonnie also asked about the accessibility certificate, if we can give more information. If I
Sure.
recall, yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, basically within the application itself, you're given guidance about, providing certification that the programs that you will offer will be publicly accessible, which is a requirement of National Endowment for the Arts, or that you will make reasonable accommodations. So that means that if somebody contacts you and say, within a certain amount of time that you advertise to let them know, that you will make it accessible based upon what their request is. So you can go through a self-assessment, which is available through a link in the application itself that was developed with the National Endowment for the Arts. And then you can certify the date and put your name in on when you did that self-assessment, or you can bring somebody in to do that for you. Some people may even have an accessibility task force that can do that as well. So generally, lots of folks will just do a self-assessment using the checklist. It's really helpful actually to try to identify sort of the strengths and areas to improve for your organization's accessibility readiness. And if you do have any questions regarding accessibility after you go through the application and sort of you're like, no, I need a little bit more help, then don't hesitate to reach out to Stephanie Haynes at the Indiana Arts Commission. You can find her contact information on our website and she'd be more than happy to help.
great.
I just realized that I left one thing out of my presentation, which is just to remind you all that there is one more Arts for All workshop coming up this year. And if you haven't been participating in those, boy, are you missing out. They've been so much fun and so interesting. But there's one more left. I believe it's on the 16th. I'll find the link for that and put it in the chat here momentarily. But that's really a great conversation about accessibility to the arts, as well as diversity, inclusion, and access. That's still accessibility to the arts, right? Throughout the state, and you'll get to talk to your other partners within your region, which I think is also just wonderfully enlightening and adds to the sense that you're not working on this alone. We're all in this together. So definitely check those out. I'll put the link here in just a sec.
To add one point to the accessibility question, the self-assessment is great. We've done it here. I found great value, however, in inviting in folks who have disabilities, some patrons in wheelchairs, to come into the gallery and give me feedback from their perspective as the people who actually use the space, as opposed to just my impressions of what the space is like. Whoever asked a question about new construction, that was absolutely essential for us as we built out our gallery space. Our architect was designing ADA compliant, and yet when we had friends in wheelchairs come in and go through what had been outlined, we realized that it was compliant, but maybe the space wasn't as comfortable going through this specific door, and ended up ripping out a wall after it was already built, because we really wanted to honor the needs and the comfort of the folks who had actually impacted. So and you know, that kind of goes back to what Philip was sharing with us earlier. It's a two-way conversation in accessibility as much as it is in diversity or equity or inclusion. So.
Yeah, thanks so much for that, Anne. I think that's really great information to share. And Ailey did put the registration link for the Arts for All webinar in the chat. I'm not seeing any other questions, so thank you so much for joining us, and please don't hesitate to reach out to your regional arts partner if you have questions when you work on the application. Have a great afternoon.